Folks, it's not been a good year for the Hawks. Still looking for their first win in the SEC, but regardless of how the team's doing, we always enjoy the conversation with Ty Hudson. You can join him on Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. Get on over there. Check out Ty's work. Basketball season's on the come here, and the Hogs are going to be pretty good. Ty, what's going on?
What's going on, Mark? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Of course, the big news on the football front was during a bye week after a dismal 7-3 loss against Mississippi State. All you have to do is say 7-3, and obviously there's an issue with the offense. And I'm looking at Dan Enos's numbers after that firing and thinking this was a top 15 offense in the country last year. Of course, Rocket Sanders blew up, had a great year last year. He's been banged up with injuries. KJ Jefferson, we know how good he can be with the right support. What in the world has gone wrong this year?
Whew. Do we have about an hour and a half? No? Well, then all I could say is a square peg round hole, which I've said about a bajillion times on my show. It's just it was never a perfect marriage between Dan Enos and the offense. I don't know. It's up in the air as to whether or not it's all on him or if it's just 80 to 90% on Dan Enos. But it was never a great fit. And I wish I had seen that because, coming into the season, I'm not ashamed to say it. I bought I bought the Kool-Aid. I poured the powder in the water, stirred it up, and poured me a glass and took a big old gulp. I bought in and drank the Kool-Aid that Dan Enos was going to return to form like what he did in 2015 or 2016. Both those years, they were really good on offense. He gave Arkansas one of only 3 times in school history they've amassed over 6,000 yards of total offense. We know what he did year 1 at Maryland. It was really good, and year 2 kind of a downward trickle a little bit. I'm sure some Maryland fans going to correct me and say, no, it was absolutely atrocious. Thank you for taking him off our hands. But it's very clear that no Kendall Briles makes KJ a dull boy. It's not been fun, and the offense has been the problem. And it really started it against Kent State earlier in the year, week 2, when you only beat a really bad Kent State team 28-6, and they haven't won since then. It's just been it's been a downward trend for this offense since Kent State, and somehow they managed to beat Kent State. When you think about how poorly they played against Mississippi State, it's almost amazing that they even beat Kent State when you think about how bad things are on the offensive side of the ball. Thank God for the defense who've kept you in every one of these games, maybe outside of A&M. But if not for them, I think these scores would be very much, it wouldn't be any of this 27-20, 24-21 stuff. It'd be a much larger gap in the loss. So, yeah, it's been I won't even say a bumpy ride. It's been an awful ride for Hog fans.
And Ty, that's where I was headed next with this, is that this is not baseball where you play a million games and your record is truly what it is, and it is who you are. Yes, we have to evaluate teams based on their record first and foremost, but this is a team that I've kind of lost track of to a certain extent. I saw that 7-3 score against Mississippi State and then had to look at the box score to see what in the world went wrong and what, well, of course, Rocket Sanders isn't playing. And then he had KJ Jefferson. I don't know that I've ever seen this. He completed 19 passes in that game for less than 100 yards. That's hard to do. That's a lot of dink and dunk around the field. But I did watch the Alabama game, and this team is pretty close to having a decent record right now, having a couple wins in the SEC. So it's not like they're the next version of Vanderbilt.
No, and that's what's crazy about all this. Like I said a minute ago, the defense has been the reason, and I'm not giving enough credit to the special teams. I mean, they got a guy in Max Fletcher outside of maybe 3 so-so punts, actually 2 really bad punts and then 1 so-so punt. Outside that, this dude I think he averages something like almost 50 yards a boot. He had a game, I don't remember if it was A&M or Ole Miss, where he averaged something like 60 yards a punt or 55 yards a punt, and he had 4 times he was able to punt the ball back behind the 20-yard line. That's flipping the field, man. And then the defense has played a huge role in what's happened. The offense was never close this year. Again, you look at, they managed to score 31 points against BYU, and they've not done that since. Well, they did it against
And
LSU
LSU.
as well, but they haven't surpassed 31 points, other than the Western Carolina game, the very first game of the year against, Western Carolina. So they're not very consistent, and they're bad across the board. It starts up front with the line of scrimmage. The pass blocking, blocking period has just been horrible. KJ has about a second and a half to do anything with the football. And I think I've only missed probably 4 snaps all year, and I've gone back and rewatched some of these games. He has no time. So I don't know if Kendall Briles' veer and shoot offense was able to kind of mask the deficiencies that this team had. Maybe they've had these problems all along, and Enos was just, he was the wrong man at the wrong time, or maybe the wrong man at the right time to kind of put a spotlight on the issues that Arkansas has. I do think some of it is a talent issue. The offensive line getting put on their backs. I mean, it's embarrassing. Mark, it's really bad. It sucks to go back and rewatch that, but it is really, really bad. I've got some people pulling me in the direction of, well, listen, Ty, it's all on Enos. Now they've got a different, someone else is going to call the plays. Kenny Guyton, the former wide receiver coach, is going to take over those responsibilities. And it was all the scheming, and they weren't going fast enough. So now we're going to go with a high tempo, which they are. They're going to go high tempo. I think they are going to implement more RPO. It's going to mirror something similar to what Kendall did in the veer and shoot, but it's going to be out of Enos's playbook if we're understanding Coach Pittman correctly here. So maybe it is all Enos. Maybe these guys, it never meshed right with what they're supposed to, with what their responsibilities were and their capabilities of operating within that offense, what he ran, which is primarily pistol formation, pro style offense. Maybe it just never was a good mesh, or it was the other way around. There's no talent on this football team on the offensive side of the ball. And, again, Enos was just kind of the spotlight. He was spotlighting the issues. And so now they're going to have to find a way forward. Hopefully it is going faster. Hopefully it is implementing more RPO that'll at least mask some of the deficiencies that they have on the offensive side of the ball. And maybe they can go to Florida and give them a ball game. I mean, they've done it listen, when you can go to Ole Miss, you can go to Oxford, lose 27-20, you go to Tuscaloosa and lose 24-21. You're at LSU, you lose 34-31. Why can't they go to Florida and give these guys a ball game? I think they can. I think they will. But I don't know. I think some fans really believe this is the answer. Like, they're going to be fine moving forward. Those are the minority of the fans. Most people think that the season's it's over with, and they're probably right. But it is Florida's. Listen, these last 4 games, Pittman. This is going to tell the future of Arkansas football and Sam Pittman. Very important that they take a big step in the right direction this weekend.
It's funny how these former players pop up years later as assistant coaches. Like, I had lost track of Kenny Guyton.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State fans will remember him. He was never the starting quarterback there, but he had a couple huge moments in a undefeated 2012 season. He came in to the game for an injured Braxton Miller and led a remarkable comeback.
Yeah.
And a win over Purdue. And he also threw a school record 6 or 7 touchdowns in a game against, I think, Florida A&M.
Oh, wow.
In winning like 76-0, something like that. So then I see him pop up, thanks to you, Dan Enos, boom, Kenny Guyton. I'm like, that Kenny Guyton? Yeah, that Kenny Guyton. And he's running the offense.
Yeah.
Ty, if this were the old days, I'd say, well, of course, this team is playing for a bowl bid because bowl bids are important. But I don't know how they're viewed by everyone. Everyone's a little bit different. Some old people are old school, and it still means something to them to get to a bowl game and got to finish with a winning season. Others is like, okay, once you're out of the championship race, forget it. Why are we playing? Let's focus on recruiting or another sport.
That's not Hawk fans. They know, like, for the most part, they know we're not playing for a national championship. We just wanted to be better than 6-6.
So these games still matter, and that's where I was leading to. What is this team playing for?
Yeah, it's well, what's the team playing for, and then what's Sam coaching for, right? Sam's coaching for his job.
Yeah.
If he drops, I'm going to say if he drops the next two, I don't see him beating. I'm going to be real. I don't think he's going to beat Missouri. Once again, Missouri. I mean, golly, you talk about perfect timing coming into this league.
I know you love Mizzou.
They have benefited from Arkansas's worst stretch in history in terms of wins and losses in conference. It's the worst stretch. I'm pretty sure I'm almost certain it's worse than the 90s. Of course, you had Houston Nutt at the tail end of the 90s, but you had Jack Crow to start the 90s off, and he was fired right after losing to the Citadel. So
Danny Ford. Yep.
Danny Ford, yeah, and then Houston. This has been a horrible stretch for them, and Mizzou's lucked out in terms of they get to say that we own Arkansas in football, and they do. They absolutely do, and I don't see Arkansas winning that game. And if you can't beat Missouri, you couldn't beat Mississippi State. I don't know. I mean, I try to cover it a week-to-week basis. I try not to just say, oh, well, they're losing out, right? But I will say the likelihood of them getting even just 2 wins, I mean, it looks pretty rough. Unless, again, maybe the answer is let's simplify the playbook. Sam Pittman said earlier this week, we've cut out, I think 35% of the playbook is what they've cut out. So moving forward, they're gonna have a much more simplified version of what they were running, and they're gonna go with the faster tempo. And again, I think they're gonna implement more RPO. They're gonna try and move the pocket. They're gonna try and roll KJ out a little bit more. Maybe play to his strengths. I don't know. That seems like a crazy thought. But we'll see if that's, at least if it's not the answer, maybe just a step in the right direction. And if that's the case, with how well this defense has played, Mark, how great special teams has been, who knows? I mean, I don't want to be the guy to go, oh, they're going to win out, or they're going to win 3 of the last 4 or whatever. But that's what's at stake is a bowl game. And listen, I'm all, I mean, yeah, you want to make a bowl game. I know, speaking to the fans who don't care, you want this because it's also going to help you get better in the offseason, because that's just more practices you get, preparing for a bowl game. It's another opportunity, at least for a win. I know you could also argue it's an opportunity for a loss as well, but Pittman's got a pretty good record in bowl games right now. So, yeah, a lot on the line for him as a coach. I think he's got to win. I think he's got to win 2 games to keep his job. And even that might be a little bit of a stretch, because then you're looking at 4-8 in year 4. So it's going to be interesting to see how this offseason plays. But a big part of, I think some of the more reasonable fans have a pretty good argument when they say, okay, get to 4-8, let him keep his job, because we don't want to lose this defensive staff. We don't want to lose Coach Fountain, who's coached the special teams, and finally 4 years later has them rocking and rolling. We don't want to lose that. And maybe just let him correct the mistake. He knows now, I can't go get a pro style guy if you can get KJ to come back, and he's got another year of eligibility because of COVID. So my screen turned itself off. There we go. So now that you can't just go out and just grab someone. If you're going to talk KJ into coming back another year, I see him. He's probably more likely going to transfer no matter what. But if you want to have success with KJ, maybe even Criswell, and they've got another cat behind them that's a RPO guy that committed to Kendall Briles that wants to run the veer and shoot. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. I've covered him all season. He's a 4-star out of South Georgia. But maybe you go after another RPO coach. Maybe you go after someone who runs that high tempo, something similar to the veer and shoot, and give him an opportunity. Give Coach Pittman another year. Give him an opportunity. But that 5th year, now it's like, well, the expectations are you better win. You better win big, or else you're likely going to be gone.
It seems to be following the Brett Bielema path. Brett Bielema takes over a struggling program. He has a rough first season. Then it gets better and better and better. He starts beating top 25 teams. He wins bowl games. And then the latter portion of that second to last season that was looking like a really good season, they kind of wilt down the stretch. They lose a close one to Mizzou. They blow a lead there. Then they go to a bowl game and blow a historic lead against Virginia Tech, and they 7-6. Well, one more shot, boom, bad season.
Yep,
you're out.
He was fired as he was heading to the lockers
Right.
after the Mizzou game. And that could be. I mean, this is what's crazy. We could see something like that play out again, where it all comes down to the Mizzou game, and if he can win it, maybe he can keep his job, depending on what happened against your previous three opponents. It's kind of crazy to think that Mizzou, it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen. He could be, it may already be predetermined that he's gone for all that we know, but I could see him getting fired headed to the locker room after Mizzou. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I feel like I should say the threshold is he's got to win at least 2 more games. And then, you can kind of excuse your way out of this, make all these excuses. Well, look how close we were all these other games. If only they had an offense, and that's going to be that'll be what probably saves him. Not only that, but we also have to think about recruiting. They have 3 commitments that are top 100 players. That's never happened before that I can think of in modern recruiting history at Arkansas, to have 3 top 100 players. They've had, 4 or 5 top 250. It's not like they've been a complete disaster in recruiting. They're typically kind of towards the back there in the SEC, but my gosh, when 10 teams finish inside the top 20 in recruiting, it's just kind of what you're up against, especially when you've been trying to fight your way back up a very slippery hill, which is the SEC for Arkansas. That's something else you think about, right? You think about how well he's done in the portal, because he's done a pretty decent job in the portal. I would argue probably should have looked at the offensive line a little bit more, only bringing in 2 guys, older guys, a couple of transfers. One of them starts, Joshua Braun. But I think that those are some reasonable reasons as to why you'd think twice about firing him at the very least. Like, okay, he's done a pretty good job. They frog stomped Texas here in 2021. He won 9 games. He won 7 a year ago. This year, we just have to chalk it up to what it is. I'm not picking sides before any Hog fans take any shots. I don't even read the comments anymore. But I know people do not. Some people just don't like the brutal honesty that I give them. But I'm not taking sides. I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't fire Sam, but I will say if you can't even get to 4 wins, man, I don't know. You kind of wonder if Hunter isn't putting out the feelers, looking for the next guy to take Sam's job, and I'm not saying I'd be against that either. Like, something's got to happen. This is just getting old. Every 4 years, here we are. We're right back here. So I don't know. Maybe firing Sam isn't the answer, but I don't know.
Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. It's a good time. Get on over there. Check out Ty's work. Ty, we always appreciate you stopping by and breaking things down, even when it's not the most enjoyable.
Seems like more times than not, I'm here when things are looking bleak for Razorback football. But yeah, basketball, a lot of Hog fans are just doing this. Like, oh, thank God. Like they just beat Purdue in an exhibition game. Number 3, Purdue. Really good basketball game, went into overtime. I'm doing of course I'm covering everything, football, basketball, a little bit of baseball, but yeah, I get it. I'm not going to please everybody. I'm going to make some people mad. Some people are going to like what I say and some aren't. Just it's the nature of the business, but hopefully they can get this turned around, and I try not to be hopeless about it. Maybe Kenny Guyton is the right guy to dial the buttons. I will say this, the players like playing for him. The receivers that he coached, they really liked playing for him. I don't know that I ever got that vibe with Danny Enos. And that's coming from someone who's been to practice, going all the way back to spring to fall camp. I never really saw anyone get super excited. So maybe that changes.